to today's program with Nathan Carter, who Nathan is the genesis of our Utmost grant. It was Jason Grout, myself, talking to you about CCLI stuff in Portland 5 years ago or something. Got us wound up. So Nathan is responsible. Nathan's always doing interesting things, and he's going to tell us about something interesting, and I will add it to the schedule after you're done.
Okay.
Once I know what the title is.
You engage in revisionist history at these meetings. Okay. So Jane said hers was informal. Mine is even more informal because I just typed up a few cells of Markdown as the a little outline we're going to go through. So you actually used Beamer or whatever. So the whole purpose, the reason that I came to this Sage Days was because I have something that I wanted to exist in Sage. And it's a large project, so I came here to dedicate some time with people nearby who could easily give me advice when I got stuck, to making just a prototype of something that I wish were really implemented and much better, so that people could see what the idea actually was. Sorry, am I moving too much? I can stay on one place. And so that's what I did yesterday and the day before. And I had a little tiny bit of it already started from when I was bothering William at the Sage booth at the joint meetings in January, and I just kind of built on that. So I'm going to tell you just what I've thrown together in the past 2 days, and you should see this as very much of a, just beginning to crawl demo. This is a prototype. It's not what it really ought to be. All right, so this actually works very well to follow your talk because I'm thinking of students who are first encountering a computer algebra system and maybe do not know how to program at all. So imagine you're a freshman in a calculus course maybe, and your professor wants you to use Sage to do math, but code confuses you. You've never seen it, you don't understand it, you don't necessarily want to learn it. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not my next bullet point contradicts that. You're willing to learn, but only to a point. If it takes forever to learn something before you can even get started using it to solve your math problems, that's not motivating to you. Right? So the opportunity that I see there, I'm not going to read you these bullet points, but is that, there's only a small finite number of things that most people in such a situation actually want to do. You could list out the 20 common strategies that they need to solve a lot of the problems in that first course and another 20 or 30 for the next course and so on. And for each of those things, you could write up a little set of instructions. If you need to do this in Sage, here are the 4 lines of code you type. If you need to do this in Sage, here are the 4 lines of code you type. All right, so let's make that interactive. Let's make a user interface for it so that they can more easily choose things. And maybe the code won't just be, here's what you should type, but maybe some of it will be generated and computed for them to match exactly what they want to do. And so that's the plan. So if I want to make a user interface like that, so any such user interface, first of all, would need to actually remember what computations have happened so far in the worksheet so that it can say, oh, I see, you've got a function and you've got a such and such, you might want to put them together in this way. So that didn't used to be possible before the cloud.sagemath.org because the old Sage notebook did not keep track of, at least not in the way that I could access, the computations that had been done. You got the output in the worksheet as text, but you could not get to the actual Python object of that in a list of the Python objects that had been generated by your evaluated cells in an easy way. But now that is possible. William mentioned yesterday that this default mode will make it so that you can put any routine you want as what's in charge of evaluating a cell. So I can put one in there that just does exactly the normal thing, but also remember the result. Right? So now I can have a result of all the things that have been computed. A user interface like this would also have to be able to communicate with the server, be able to say, ship some Python code off, have it evaluated, and get the result back that could then be dealt with on the client side in JavaScript for presenting an interface to the user. I don't think that was possible before. I could be wrong, but now there is an easy way to do that. There's a worksheet.execute code which runs the Sage code, then gives you a callback to JavaScript when it's done. And the user interface can't look bad. And this would have been a pain before, but now Sage comes with Bootstrap built in, so now it can look good. So this is the opportunity now. We're kind of ready to try this. So that's demo here. So I have another tab, except I've zoomed in so much that we're in mobile mode. So hold on, I got to zoom out. There's my other tab. Okay, so you have to imagine that, so this is the prototype, so imagine that this were actually built into Sage so that those first 2 cells there that load everything up aren't really necessary. All right, so this is the prototype where those 2 cells have to be there. But you can imagine for a moment that I don't actually have to come in here and load these 2 things. What those two things do when I run them is that they, in a very hackish way, put this button on the toolbar, okay? The button that says no code please. So that's the working title for this project is no code please, right? So you have someone that wants to use Sage or something but doesn't know how to do the code. So, so pretend that everything from here up is not there and that we have a blank worksheet which is right here. So I've just put in a couple of simple strategies that deal with like the very beginnings of calculus and linear algebra. Right? So I click the no code please button, and oh, we're in mobile mode, so this looks a little different than it did for me.
Just zoom out a little.
All right, so will it change while I?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's responsive.
All right, good. So it says, what would you like to do? And I've just got a couple of things in here. So these are the things you can do apropos of nothing. Right? You've got a blank worksheet. You have no objects defined. So it says, I want to define a single variable function or create a matrix or create a vector. So I'm going to pick define a single variable function and do it. So what it does is it writes a bunch of code for me. It has this template. It fills it in. And the template is littered with comments because the idea is, so first of all, you have to actually understand the code that it's writing for you because you might need to tweak it, right? This defines the function x squared, but maybe that's not the one you wanted to define. And secondly, you also are going to need to understand the output that this gives when you execute it. So here's a little coaching that says when you evaluate this code, it's going to write something like that, which means, so you have to understand the output you're going to get. And finally, you want, at least I want, that somebody who's using this interface will actually be learning the code a little bit at a time while they're using this. So this does it for you, but as you have to read this to understand it and fill in your function, you're starting to see, oh, this is not so bad. I might have been able to do it by myself, especially since it's explaining it to you as you go along. And if you forget it, it's okay. You could always use that tool again the next time. But eventually, after you've done this 5 times to define a single variable function, you're not going to have to do it anymore. So, so this did not execute this code because I might want to change it. Maybe I actually wanted x to the third minus 5, right, as my function. So then eventually I run it, and it defines my function. Okay. So then maybe I want a graph of the function. So then I don't know how to do that. So I go back over to no code, please. And so it says select some objects you want to work with, and now it actually knows that I have this map from x to x cubed minus 5, which is called f, and I can choose what I want to do with those things. Well, I haven't selected that one, so it's still giving me the things you can do with nothing. Right? But when I hit the checkbox, then it says, oh, you've got a function. I know what functions are. You can do lots of stuff with them, right? And so it's got this list of things you can do with it. So maybe I want to make a graph of f. And so I say do it, and it writes the code that would make a graph of f. And it says, you know, I'm graphing from 0 to 10, but go ahead and change the numbers if you want to before you evaluate. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it.
Nathan?
Yeah.
Did you populate that list of things you could do yourself, or did you pull it out of the doc strings for the methods associated to the object?
Okay. That is an excellent question with a really long answer. No, I did not. Short answer, no, I didn't. I populated it myself. I did not pull it out of any doc strings.
Okay.
But let me come back to that, and if I don't come back to it, remind me. Actually, let's just, so you get the idea. So there's other things. Let me just do one more. And so let's define a matrix. Right? And so down here, it's written the code for a matrix. And then, it'll say, there's things you can do with matrices if you go up and pick the matrix. Right, then there's stuff you can do with matrices. Okay. I've just put a couple of these in. So let's see, so I'll show you the file where I put all this stuff. I call it, it's recipes.txt. And it's just, here they are. But you have to, they have titles, so this says, make a table of values for capital F. F has to be a Sage symbolic expression, which is not exactly the best. This is a demo. That maybe is not the best thing it should be. And then there's the template of code. And it will replace every instance of capital F with whatever the thing you check as the checkbox is called. So like this would be little f for the example I had over there. And so it, and there are situations where, let's see, where there's, yeah, so, compose f and g. So if you have two functions, which these are not really functions, they might be equations or anything, it's not the best thing, but then it can compose them for you. So you just, write a file like this. You could envision that there would be, 24 files like this for each different topic of mathematics, and that the student would go in and just check off the 2 that are relevant for their course and only get the suggestions that matter for them. You could imagine that you might generate files like this from the doc strings of functions. The thing that so you could do whatever you want with this. In fact, you should think of this project as 2 halves. One of them is just the infrastructure that lets people click these buttons, and the other one is choosing sensibly what goes in a file like this to give students something useful. I'm thinking of it a little bit at a higher level than just the individual atomic functions that are available. I'm thinking of it more like you might actually have a strategy that is, that a student would naturally think of as something that they want to accomplish, and that takes maybe 3 or 4 lines of code that goes in here. So I'm thinking a little bit higher than that most granular level of call a single function. But you certainly could make a mammoth one of these that has, everything about matrices function by function. Right? Okay, so let me pause there and ask if there's any questions at this point. I'm almost done, just a few more things to say.
I have a suggestion, which is you should tell people that the pound symbol is a comment symbol. So if they don't know code, they're going to look at that and wonder
Yes. Yeah, no.
what's going on.
These recipes are not meant to be perfect examples of, but yes,
You
that's
know,
a
like
good
the
point.
first time it pops up, this is a comment symbol.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
Any other-
your goal is to teach them how to use Sage. Am I understanding you correctly? I mean, you're not just building a UI that lets them click shit and get stuff to happen. You want them to also see the code. That's an important part of what you're doing. Do I understand?
Insidiously so, yes. Yeah, that would not be necessarily their motivation, but that would be a byproduct. Yes, yeah, you can't just I don't want to put a user interface that hides the code. I want to put a user interface that shows you how you could have made the code yourself. Yeah.
See the code and understand the code.
Right, so, as imagine that every student had me sitting next to them and they'd say, I want to do this. And I would say, oh, let me show you. I'll write you a couple lines of code and explain them to you. So the next time you get, well, they don't need me. They would just use this all the time. And then eventually they would stop asking and just do it.
So one of the students who did a final project in my Sage course last quarter was like almost the same thing, except yours is cleaner looking. But the idea was...
Why didn't you tell me that? I could have saved 2 days right now.
I did actually, but it was just a hugely nested interact where you'd select an area.
Oh, yeah,
map
that,
and
yes.
But at the end of the day, you type some numbers in to make a matrix or something, and then you click a box and it would show you all the code. And the idea was very similar in that you want to give the person the ability to use the code to do more sophisticated things. Although he wanted to make it was more like a graphing calculator in that you could actually get everything done, but it had an option that would show all the code. Whereas yours is just all the code. So it's like there's like a step that he had that you don't have.
Yeah, no, you did tell me that
So it's a little different.
The difference that I would like is that, well, in my perfect world, of course, I'm not in charge of this, so my opinion is just my opinion, but I would like to see, that button that I hackishly put up there. It would be nice if there were a little whatever you think the icon ought to be, if that were just always there, and that this were thoroughly integrated, so that it's not like you have to go to a special web page in this one interact that this one person invented that has, it would take, whatever the enormous amount of data like this has to be loaded every time. Rather, that button will be there, and when you click it, then you pick the few checkboxes for the collection of these that you want to load, no matter who you are or where you're using Sage. In the project you're in, not in a separate web page.
I think I just want to. I'm just saying that it's there's a lot of demand for what you are doing, basically.
Yeah, no, but that is very related. But I'm thinking of something that's a little bit more seamlessly integrated with the rest of the system.
No, it's just that if random people keep making the same thing, that suggests things should exist.
Right. Okay, so I'll just make a few last comments, and then this screen is not answered.
One question, what happens if you check more than one object?
Right, so right now that kind of works and kind of doesn't. So let's go ahead and do, I would like to create a vector, do it, here's V. Okay, and so now I want to, oh no, I think I turned off, oh here, hold on, let me make another single variable function. And we're gonna call this one G, oops. And do that. So now we go up here. Hello. Okay. We have this and this, and it says, oh, the only thing I know how to do with two functions is compose them. And so then it says, okay, well, I'm going to build H, and it goes like this. Now, the problem with that is one thing that you need to do if you're going to accept multiple parameter ones. That one, it was somewhat irrelevant. You have to consider all the possible permutations of the checked items that match the signature and that match types up correctly. I don't do that right now. You'd have to do that, of course, to do this correctly. So with that one, it didn't matter because they were both functions. It composed them in one of the two ways you might have wanted to, but maybe you wanted to compose them the other way, and that's not in there. You know, I have like, I had originally, in this file, they are disabled right now. You see the comment symbol. Multiply a vector as a row times a matrix, multiply a matrix as a vector times a vector as a column. These are disabled because it kept, sometimes it would get them in the correct order and sometimes it would mix up the matrix and the vector based completely on, I don't remember what the default ordering of the things was. So if you added that necessary feature of correctly matching up the all the possible permutations and the types and so forth, then these things would work, but I haven't added that feature yet. So
You can do it in the fact that the user, instead of checking, it matters in which order it checks it.
well, it has to, the suggestions are only going to come up based on the types of what the user selected. So already sort of half have to deal with it, but yeah. Yeah, and I would only want to create code that made sense. I wouldn't want to put on them the burden that if you do something wrong in this interface, you may get nonsense code. I would like the user interface to guarantee that it will only generate sensible code. Maybe not strategically wise code based on your problem setting in whatever your real world interpretation of these quantities is, but at least code that does mathematically sensible stuff.
If you're using your worksheet and you define some other stuff by hand, does it then know about them when you do the no code please? If you
Yeah.
define a matrix.
Yeah, so the way that that's working, there's a, I'm not going to show it, but there's one of these lines up here. This no code please.sage, it sets the default mode for interpreting worksheet cells as run the code, then store the result in a dictionary. And everything in that dictionary is open for populating the checkbox list. Which of course will mean that if you have a giant worksheet, then the UI will be taller than your screen. So that can eventually become useless. But
So if you just define expression x cubed minus 5, will it remember it
yeah.
without a name?
Yes, so if I say like, just like x cubed plus x to the fourth plus 5, and I run that, then when I go no code please, it knows about it, but it calls it what you typed in, right? So it doesn't know the name. It doesn't have a name. And so if you write code with that, then it will just reuse that entire expression, which in some situations could be inefficient. You maybe should have given it a name so that you don't have to reevaluate it again. But in this situation, it wouldn't matter, right?
That would be problem solving if, for instance, after that you define x to be something else.
Yeah, so I have a list of tasks. Some of them say future. And so if A equals something is evaluated repeatedly, I should only list the most recent A on the list of checkboxes. I do not currently do that, but that should be done. Because otherwise you pick an old one and A doesn't equal that anymore. So, yeah.
No, but I'm talking about the expression you had, x cubed, whatever. That depends on what x is.
Yes, that too.
So if after that you redefine x, you get a different object.
Yes, that's true. Yes. So, yeah, so maybe this should only pay attention to things that you gave names to?
Or you could store not just the chain that you used to create it, but the object itself. And if you only
Yeah, I could give my own names to things, right? But the trouble with that then is I'd have to use my own weird names in the code I generate, remembered object 75 plus 12, and they'll be like, what in the world is that? You know,
Yeah.
but you could do it, yeah.
Are you taking requests?
Okay, that's an excellent question. That is the perfect segue to the rest of what I was going to say. So let me tell you a little bit of where this is going in the future. No, not where it's going in the future. That's a bad way to say that. Let me tell you some things that I had envisioned for this. So what's happening right here is it's just dumping static chunks of code into the page with substitution, like just the names changed to match what you checked. Right? I used capital F in the recipe, but you used lowercase k. It changes the capital F's to lowercase k's. That's all that's going on. It would be nice, however, if it could do some more sophisticated computation to generate the code. So for example, maybe you've written code like this. Maybe you can't see that. Let me zoom in. All right, so let's say you wrote. So let's say you've written code like this. I make a variable, I make a function, and I plot the function, right? But then you would like to reuse that code multiple times with different constants, right? So you might click in there and go to no code please and say, turn this into a function, right? Which is easy for us to do, but is actually somewhat more abstract step of coding than just write what you want it to do, write what you want to do, write what you want it to do, right? So that's something that a beginner may need help with. And so then it should look through and find the constants and say, oh, I see, the constants are 5, 1, and 10, I replace them with A, B, and C, and then so I define a function that does that, and then I call it here as an example, and then that the person could then reuse that, call the example multiple times. Abstracting specific recipes into reusable functions, that would be a nice no code please step. Or taking an existing function like the one that was just built and turning it into something interactive. That would be nice if it could sort of process and modify your code for you in these ways. It can't do that right now. Like I said, we're just picking recipes off the list and inserting static code. But if it could compute with the cell you were in and modify it, that would be nice. And like I already said, if you had, rather than one big file of recipes, if you could split it into topics and let people choose them, that would be nice. So those are some future ideas. But the bad news, is there the bad news? There it is, the bad news, is that, so my goal was to come and make a prototype that I could show in case anyone was interested in this and thought that this was worth building. Because I work on a different and much smaller open source project than Sage, I am not going to be like indefinitely building this forever. I'm glad to work with somebody to help get this going further if somebody's interested in it. But my goal was not to get sucked into doing this project forever. I'm already sucked into a different project. Sage is roughly 30 to 40 times the size of the other project I'm working on. But yes, so my goal is actually that I would perhaps get somebody else interested enough in this that they would take it over and do whatever they wanted to in the future with it. So my intent is not that I'm going to make this awesome over the course of the next year. I do not have the bandwidth for that at the moment. So this was like an advertisement of what this could be if somebody thinks it's fun enough to go ahead and run with it. Any other comments or questions? You should never end a talk with a slide that says the bad news. They're informal, right? You don't have to follow the talk rules.
All right, anything else for Nathan? Thanks a lot, Nathan.
One more suggestion: if this does take off, I see people probably are going to be dependent on it in some ways, just because it'd be a whole lot easier to have it provide the 3 lines of codes. So you may actually need a checkbox saying no comments, please. Also,
right?
Just to avoid,
Right, even if they understand the code and could type it themselves, even if they've got to that point, they would be like, well, why would I type it? I'm just going to click, 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 and it's written, and I understand it, and I could have written it, but I don't want to. Right?
Especially as you get more complex recipes that you...
Right, and then it guarantees no typos, and yeah. That's right.
I disagree.
I disagree, yeah.
Strongly, actually, because that's exactly like saying, oh, you've become dependent on doc strings for remembering how to, to integrate, or you become dependent on using Stack Overflow to, know how to do something with Git. It's just like, I mean, you could say that about any tool you use to document how you get things done.
Oh, he was not saying, I don't think he was saying, that this is bad because people might become dependent on it.
Okay.
He was saying that because people are going to use it a lot, you should give them the option to not put in the copious comments every time. Right? Because they're going to want to use it as part of their normal workflow, and they don't need the comments.
Oh, I
If
see.
you define 5 different functions, you
It's
don't need that.
wasting,
Or
it's
like
wasting
some comment
space.
every
Right.
So it would be just like
So-
copying out of doc strings and
Right.
having it delete the sage colon prompt.
Right.
Okay, I totally agree with you. I totally understand.
Yes, I won them over.
Alright, so as long as I'm standing in front of you, I will take 10 seconds for an advertisement. So the other project I work on is a math word processor that can check the steps of a student's proof. If that sounds interesting to you, come and talk to me later and I'll show you a little bit. Thanks.
All right, thanks again, Nathan.
So that's you.
That concludes today's program. Free time. Status reports will be at 4 today because at least 2 people, maybe more, are catching planes out at 8 o'clock or something like that. So we're planning extra time for status reports. So if you finish something and want to talk a couple of minutes at more length than usual, feel free. If you really want to show something really quick up front, we can plug laptops in and make that part of status reports. And survey's a little longer, right, Susan?
Yes.
Slightly bigger survey, but
It's quite longer.
quite longer. Don't say that. Okay.
So we should start
See you
filling it
right
out
around.
now?
Get started.
Kidding.
I have some dark chocolate peanut M&Ms since there's no other chocolate today.